Thank you for listening to this PodcastOne production. Now available on Apple Podcasts, PodcastOne, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
All right, so anyway, I'm out here at the Broken Skull Ranch, and you guys have been wanting to hear conversations of me talking with some of the current WWE superstars. So with that being said, that's what I'm doing today, and I'm very glad to have one of my favorites in the game going right now, Daniel Bryan, joining me here. Good morning, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Steve?
Man, it's a beautiful day at the Broken Skull Ranch. I want to tell you something, man. I was so excited about talking to you. I skipped going to the deer stand so I could have this conversation. And I know you are on a busy schedule as well. Let me ask you something. You're on a little bit of a hot streak right now, and you've certainly paid a lot of dues to get to where you're at right now. We're going to go back and talk about that a little bit. But Nassau Coliseum is one of the quirkiest buildings in the United States, because you can go there as a hot baby face and sometimes get booed out of the building. You can make a comeback there as a baby face who is very over and get a mediocre response at best. And sometimes when that happens, it'll just crush your ego. So many times when I'm talking to my buddies like Kevin Nash, who have been there and done that, it's like that is the place you don't want to make a comeback. And this, when I say this is with all due respect to the Nassau County Coliseum fans, because I love them. I love them to death. I love all the crowds. So my question to you is, how was the crowd last night? Were they a hot crowd, or were they a little ambivalent?
Well, I actually was in that unfortunate position to have to make a comeback in front of the Nassau Coliseum crowd, and actually they were awesome. And they were, well, I'm gonna change tones here a little bit. They were awesome for me. Different points of the show, they had kind of turned on what was going on in the ring, as they tend to do. But to me, a lot of times that just makes the show more interesting and fun to see what the crowd does. You know, it's raw, it's unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen.
With the advent now of a 3-hour Monday Night Raw, you know, back in the day when I was still running hot and heavy, it was a 2-hour show. You know, you had a couple of warm-up matches and maybe a dark match after the taping to keep the people still in the seats. I know they kind of eliminated that, but now you guys are working a 3-hour live TV show. What time are you guys required to be at the building in general?
I think it's the same, because so when I started with WWE, it was still 2:00, and we still have to be there at 2. So it's actually nice that they didn't make us go there earlier. Although I probably shouldn't say that. Somebody's going to listen to this and be like, "Oh man, he's right. We need to get these guys here an hour earlier." But yeah, you know, now we still don't get there till 2. So it's not too bad. You guys,
you've been in WWE for quite a long time now, and obviously you were there for the 2-hour Raws versus the 3. How has this changed the dynamic? Is it a lot of hurry up and wait? Is it just sometimes get to be a little bit of a grind? What's the difference? Because it's only 1 hour, but it's noticeably a longer show.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference to me is the acts that are just kind of starting to get over or haven't gotten over yet have a much harder time in that 3rd hour. It is so difficult for those people. So if you're on in like that, you know, around 10:15 or 10:20, and they've already seen John Cena and they've already seen CM Punk and they've already seen Triple H and whoever, like if you're going out there and you've got a cold match and nobody, you know, and people aren't really quite into you yet, sometimes it's really, really hard for those guys. And in an unimportant match, you know, or something that's just kind of a time filler that would usually be used to, oh man, this can really get somebody over if the crowd is hot, you know, a lot of times by the 3rd hour the crowd is tired. So that's the hardest part. I don't ever feel like it's not any more hurry up and wait than usual, you know.
But you know,
it's entertainment, but as far as performance goes, like I always prefer, unless I'm in something special, to be on in one of those first 2 hours, because you just know the crowd's just going to be more excited and more on their feet.
And let's go back to what you said when you say an unimportant match, you know, meaning in the big picture of things within World Wrestling Entertainment, because that unimportant match is of paramount importance to the two combatants going to the ring. And sometimes when they meet with the Symphony of Silence, I mean, that is nerve-wracking in and of itself and can cause so many insecurity issues, and they have so many psychological disadvantages they're working with, and it can really mess with a guy's head. So they go out there and sometimes, want to rush things, want to hurry things up to try to get that positive response that they're looking for. And it really puts them in a hard place. But along with that, comes the learning process of, hey, man, I'm not over yet. This is where I'm at.
Right.
Let me just go down this road, proceed accordingly, and don't rush things, and just try to work that crowd. And if they're not buying it, if they're not really into it, just go out there and do your job and stick to the game plan.
Yeah, and when I say unimportant matches, what I mean is how a fan perceives the match.
Correct.
Because,
I'm with you.
To me, it's like I got over doing unimportant matches when I was, and like doing matches that are literally filler between the big segments, and doing that kind of stuff, and being able to go out there and, hey, occasionally they need 2 segments to fill, and okay, we'll put Daniel Bryan out there with somebody, and we at least know it'll be exciting, so yeah, I like, but it's really, to me, much harder when the crowd sees it as an unimportant match, but they can still get into the wrestling. But if they're already tired at that point and they've already seen a lot of wrestling, then it's going to be very, very difficult. But I also agree with you in that it's a great learning tool of, like, because I've gone out there in front of 15 people and wrestled in front of silence, and that's much worse. Like, I'd rather wrestle in front of a silent 10,000 people than a silent 15 people, because then they're just looking at you like you're the biggest idiot on the planet. So, hey, why is this guy out here in underwear and fighting this guy? This is stupid. Like, that's pretty hard on your ego. So
I sometimes feel like each individual crowd kind of has a gas tank worth of applause, if you will. And sometimes so much can happen, and they can go from full to empty, and then all of a sudden you get out there. Even you can be pretty damn over and not be getting the response that you're used to getting. I mean, sometimes that happened to me as Stone Cold, and even a cat who was, speaking for myself, super over yourself, very over right now. Sometimes that can play with your head a little bit, but you got to realize that, hey, the crowd's a little bit drained. And I would always get mad when, you're fixing to go out there and have a match and the guys started begging the people to start cheering. And I'm like, come on, dude. I mean, you're really draining my gas tank before I go out here. I want to get some organic applause, cheers, and pops that I don't have to beg for, and you're draining it all out of them.
Yeah, and it's especially hard with the 3-hour Raw, because a lot of times when you're in the main event and doing that sort of thing, you've already been out there once or twice.
Oh, yeah.
You may have done a promo segment or a run-in or all this kind of stuff, so that big reaction when they first see you, it's already gone.
Oh, yeah, 2.5 hours later, now it's him again.
Right, yeah. So yeah, and it's especially hard sometimes on SmackDown, because like there'll be times that a guy will be on main event and then do a promo segment on SmackDown and then be in the SmackDown main event and just be like, oh my gosh, that's way too much for this crowd to like handle. So
yeah, they're overexposing me. They're killing me. Hey, let's talk about life on the road. I know in the last few years, a lot of the guys have gone the tour bus route, and man, I tell you, I wish I'd have been ahead of the game back then when I was on the road. It just sounds like a great way to get a little rest as far as your body's concerned, get down the road, and the comfort of a big-ass bus. Now, have you gone down the tour bus road yet?
No, I have not. And quite frankly, it would be very, very difficult for me to do it, because the tour bus is very, very expensive. And, like, I've only made good money, like, the last 2 years. You know what I mean?
I get
like Randy Orton and John Cena and those guys have been making money for years. Even like CM Punk, he's been making money for several years. Big Show's been making money since I was in high school. Since before, like, I was in high school, I think he started in WCW as a main eventer. His first match ever was in a pay-per-view main event. So, I mean, those guys have been making money for years, and so they can afford a bus. For me, it's just not financially viable right now. It's still like a couple of years down the road, because I would need X amount of savings. I'm very logical in my spending,
I like to do that.
So I'm not going to spend all the money on the bus until I know I'm financially secure enough to spend that kind of money. So, like, I look at it and I envy those guys every single day. Like, getting done with the show, okay. Like, Randy Orton takes better care of himself than probably any wrestler in history due to the fact that he has this bus. So, like, he does real thorough warm-ups and everything before his match and all that kind of stuff. But the nice thing for him is that after he's done with his match, he ices, he goes and sits on the bus. As the bus driver's driving, he's stretching and that sort of thing, and then he falls asleep. And Randy will tell you, he sleeps like 8 to 10 hours a night. And I'm like, what? How do you do that on the road? And then it's clear he's got a bus.
Yeah, well, first of all, when you say Randy Orton takes care of himself like that, I wouldn't picture him, and the guy's got a great look, physique, body, a hell of a worker, but I wouldn't picture Randy as being so scientific in the way he takes care of his body. How long has he been doing that?
I think for a couple of years, and I think ever since he had some really bad shoulder issues and stuff like that, and he kept kind of getting hurt. And so he really went in and was proactive about it. And so now, because he has something with his shoulders where they keep coming out of place or whatever, something like that. So he makes sure that he really went and found the cause of that and is attacking the cause of that. And how do I make my career last as long as possible? Well, I need to be doing this, and I need to be doing this, and I need to be doing this. And so, if you've had any dealings with Randy, you know that he has quite a temper, and one of the things that he gets angry about is if he's rushed and can't do his warm-up stuff, because for him that's very important. He gets concerned about his shoulder and all that kind of stuff if he's not properly warmed up. And I just think, man, that's such a different train of thought than wrestling must have been 20 years ago.
Well, it's changed, but first I remember back in the day, just going back a couple of years, I saw Randy taking a couple of pretty spectacular over-the-top rope bumps where he kind of missed the top ropes, and I saw some of those shoulder injuries, and that was him trying to make an impact and get a pop. But, with a worker of his caliber no longer needs to do that. So you got to pick your spots. And, going back to the fact that you're managing your money, I mean, you couldn't just show up in a crappy camper. It's got to be the Mac Daddy if you're going to do that. Right. So since you're still beating around the road in a rent-a-car, what kind of car are you guys driving these days? Who are you traveling down the road with? Or does that change on a weekly basis?
So I'm engaged right now to Brie Bella. And so we actually travel together, which is very nice. It makes life on the road a lot more comfortable, but Brie laughs at me all the time because I always go for the Nissan Altima. Always.
Hey, but it's a great car. There's nothing wrong with the Nissan Altima.
Yeah, and so it's mostly because it's so fuel efficient, and I'm weird. I'm really into the whole climate change, saving the planet thing, and all. So yeah, I like fuel efficient cars.
So you're engaged. So that's a shoot, right? Have y'all set a date as far as getting married?
We haven't set a specific date, but what we're thinking is the weekend after WrestleMania, and purely because that's the only time that after WrestleMania is the only time where we get a break, where we can schedule okay, here's some time where we can actually have a wedding, and if they let us off Raw and SmackDown that week, that means we can have a honeymoon and all that kind of stuff. So
you're not a guy that just asks for days off because you've got things you want to do. You like the grind of being on the road and the responsibility that comes with making your shots and sticking to your spot on the roster.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is I've heard people call it the grind, and I've never even considered it that. I've been a gypsy kind of my whole life, so it's to me it's fun. The only time it's hard is the really long drives after after Raw, when Raw doesn't get over till after 11, and you've been in the main event, and then you have to shower, and then you have to drive 300 miles to the next town and still be at TV at 2 o'clock. Those are the times that it feels like a grind. But I like the traveling to different towns and stuff, and me and Brie and I, we have gotten really into going to local foods restaurants, so food that's got locally local agriculture, local all that kind of stuff, and so we find these amazing restaurants and all that kind of stuff, and I don't like to go to the chain gyms. I like to go to the little weird hole in the wall gyms, and so it's fun. I mean, you get to see so much of America and so much of the world that but some guys treat it as a grind and, I have to go do this, I have to go do that. We try to see it as an opportunity to go see things that, because quite frankly, when I'm done with this, I'm not going to be going to Fairfax, Virginia. I'm not going to be going to Charlottesville. You know what I mean? I'll probably never step foot in Mohegan Sun again after I'm done wrestling.
Well, and it also, but when I refer to the grind, I was kind of hanging out with a group of people that was going out and drinking a lot of beer and other stuff. So that turned it into the grind. I love the fact of being on the road and entertaining people every night. How long have you and Bree been engaged now?
So we got engaged, I want to say it was in September. And so we've been engaged for a couple months now. So yeah, it's been really nice. We actually got engaged in Big Sur, California.
Well, bring me down. Take me through this, will you marry me type scenario. You romantic rascal.
My gosh. So it's they follow Bree around with the Total Divas show. You know? So anyway, so we went to Big Sur because we needed a little vacation and that sort of thing. And so Bree had gotten frustrated with how much, like, when you turn into a top guy, you start having top guy responsibilities, as you very well know, which means your days off a lot of times are no longer days off. They are they are spent doing media. They're spent doing doing all this different stuff. And quite frankly, for her, days off have become are no longer days off because these reality show people are just filming her all the time.
Yeah.
So anyways, we went to Big Sur and they followed us there, and but it was nice and relaxing. So we went on a 5-mile hike, and when we got to the very top of the mountain, and it's overlooking the Pacific Ocean and just beautiful, that's when I did it. So
had you planned this? Was it totally spontaneous, or did you know that would be the spot?
Yeah, I kind of knew that would be the spot, and it's amongst all the redwoods, and just we're nature people, and so she was just thinking we're just taking a vacation, and she's been anticipating me getting engaged to her for a long time. Me actually popping the question for a while because WrestleMania this year, which is way back in April, we went ring shopping together just to kind of get a gauge as far as what she likes and that sort of thing.
Right.
So we've been on the same page for a while now, but but I didn't think she was expecting it then.
What was her reaction when you popped the question?
She was very excited and very happy, and she said that it's a lot of things that a lot of her friends have told her over the years is that as it's going on, it happens so fast, and that she didn't even remember what I said, and so it's you come up, you try to come up with all the sweetest, nicest thing that you can say, and I really want this to be special, but realistically, she doesn't remember because it's all going. She sees me get down on the knee and pulling this ring out of my pocket, and she's already that sort of thing. So she said it's just it goes by so fast, and I don't even remember what you said. What did you say? And
so you did the old traditional get down on the knee routine.
Yeah, I sure did, and we're very traditional. I asked her parents ahead of time, for her hand in marriage and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then I surprised her afterwards with an engagement party. Our families had never met, so I've met her family. She's met my family.
Where is Bree from?
She's from Brawley, California, is where she was kind of raised, and then she grew up in Phoenix.
Okay.
So. But yeah, so I brought out her family and my family for this engagement party, and they'd never met each other before, so it was just a cool joining of families moment, and it was a lot of fun.
Living on the road together, or traveling to the shows as you guys do y'all currently live together now as well, full time?
Yeah, we sure do.
The thing about being on the road, I go back and forth from Los Angeles to Texas a lot in our RV with my wife and our 3 Labradors, and it's interesting to say the least because there's not a whole lot of space. We don't drive a gigantic tour bus because a lot of times it's sitting in storage. So I always tell people because we love to RV, I grew up doing it, as did my wife, but traveling together, you'll either grow closer together or you will grow further apart. And but just because of the nature of it. So it certainly puts to test how you truly feel about each other. And obviously with my wife and myself, I mean, we absolutely love it. So, good luck, with that, your impending marriage. I was happy to hear about that. I didn't know if that was a work or indeed a shoot.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's actually been a lot of fun traveling together because like before, so Bree had taken some time off, and then so she was at home, and then I was on the road, and then they increased the schedule to where now everybody does both Raw and SmackDown, you know, like kind of like when it first started, and the live events are still starting on Friday, so then you're flying out Friday morning, you come back Wednesday, you're just tired, you know what I mean?
Yep.
You have a half day Wednesday, you have Thursday, and then you fly back out Friday. So that was a lot more stressful, and then us driving together, we just have such similar personalities, and we like the same stuff, so it's fun, and most of the time pretty easy. But, you know, like any couple, we we have our little disagreements here and there.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
Hey, man, do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
I'm very glad to have one of my favorites in the game going right now, Daniel Bryan, joining me here. Let's talk a little bit about your training, where you came from. I've been, watching you for years. I have a very high respect for your work, what you do in the ring. When you graduated in 1999 from high school in Aberdeen, Washington, right off the bat, you decided that you were going to be a pro wrestler.
Yes.
Okay, there was no backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Does that meet with any resistance?
Yes, of course. And so I went and trained with Shawn Michaels when I graduated, but that wasn't the plan. I was a huge Dean Malenko fan, and he had the Malenko School of Wrestling, which was down in Florida. And when I was a sophomore in high school, actually, before I had even turned 16, I was working a crap job, like sweeping floors at McDonald's and stuff like that. But I had saved up my $500 deposit when I was 15 to go to wrestling school, and then sent it off to a lady named Phyllis Lee, who I guess was handling the money for the Malenko School of Wrestling or whatever. But then right before I graduated high school, the school shut down. And but this whole time that I was doing this, I was telling my mom, like, so I'm sorry, Mom, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to go try to be a professional wrestler. It did meet with resistance, but she also said, and my dad said the same thing, is that you have to at least try. If you don't try, you'll be unsatisfied with whatever you do. If you could go be an architect, or you could go be a doctor, or you could go be any of these millions of great things, but if you didn't pursue that one thing that you have loved since you were a little kid, you'd have a hole in your heart, kind of, from not at least trying. So they were disappointed for sure, but they were very supportive.
Well, so you wanted to go to Dean Malenko School, and I'm a huge Dean Malenko fan as well, and that would have been one of the best schools that you could have gone to. So you're in Washington State. You just moved down to San Antonio to train with Shawn Michaels. Where did you live?
Yeah. I lived in it's the first ever apartment I've ever lived at, and it was just small. It was $400 a month. It was a one-bedroom apartment that I shared with some other strange dude from Florida, and who was also trying to be a wrestler. They were actually really cool as far as getting everything set together. Shawn Michaels' mom was actually very helpful because you called this hotline or whatever, and then once you paid your deposit, they helped you set you up with other people who were moving there to train to be wrestlers. Well, the guy who moved in with me ended up quitting, ended up not being able to finish the class and that sort of thing. So then it's just me living in this little small apartment, and then Brian Kendrick ended up moving in with me. So it's two of us back in this little one-bedroom apartment, and yeah, it was really weird, and sleeping on the floor and all that kind of stuff because we didn't have any money, so.
How hands-on was Shawn with the training? Obviously, Rudy Boy Gonzalez was there assisting as well, right?
Yeah, so Rudy Boy Sean was there almost every day, and it was interesting because that was at a time when he wasn't supposed to be doing anything.
Right.
He had his surgery a year before. You guys had done the WrestleMania the March before that. So I went down in June of 2000 or of 1999, and you guys had that WrestleMania match in 1998. And so it was only a year after he had the back surgery and all that kind of stuff, and they were still of the opinion that he shouldn't be doing much of anything. And so, but Sean loves wrestling so much he can't help himself.
Right.
So he would be teaching us stuff, and he would be telling, and Rudy Boy would be the one who's kind of showing us and that sort of thing. But then all of a sudden, like me or Brian Kendrick, because we were smaller and Sean kind of took a liking to us right away. Say if we were learning to take back body drops, we would take a back body drop, and he was, oh, that's good, but you guys can get way higher if you do this. And well, okay, and he would tell us, but we didn't understand what he was doing. It was like, crap, and his passion would get the best of him. And he'd have like Lance Cade, who was like 6'5". He would just come into the ring, and it was a boxing ring, so it's a little bit stiffer, and he would come in and he'd take these big back body drops, and his feet would nearly hit the ceiling, and you'd be like, holy cow. And then he'd come in the next day, sunglasses on, barely able to walk, and just so he was very, very hands-on, more so than he should have been, to the point where, and it's funny because as a kid, you grow up and so I was just a huge wrestling fan. So training with Shawn Michaels was just unbelievable. But it humanizes him because he's in there and he's doing something that he's not supposed to. And then his mom would walk in and she would just scold him, and he would it's literally dog tucking tail between the legs type thing. And you're like, wait a second, you're Shawn Michaels. And you're still you still have to,
It's like,
this to your mom.
Mom, don't chew me out in front of the guys at the wrestling school.
Yeah.
So growing up, what federation or what brand of wrestling? You're a pretty young guy, so were you getting WWE at the time? What did you grow up watching there in Washington?
So we didn't have cable when I was a kid, and so I mostly grew up watching anything that would come through the video stores. So I didn't, and it was nice because when I started watching in maybe 1987 when I think I was 5 or 6 years old when I started watching, and it's weird because none of my family are wrestling fans. So, but my buddy introduced me to it through magazines, and you're just fascinated by the larger-than-life characters, And so, but then I would convince my mom and dad to rent these videos, all the videos that would come out, and everything was 6 months behind the pay-per-views or whatever, And so we would rent those, and then I'd read the magazines and all that kind of stuff. So I watched everything that came through the video stores, and then as I got older and was able to pay for my own stuff, I watched both WCW and WWE, but I also got into watching Japanese wrestling and Mexican wrestling, a real I hate to describe myself as a nerd because I don't feel like that's accurate, but I was a nerd for wrestling. I was that was in the era where the internet is just starting to come around to the average consumer. So all of a sudden, and especially in WCW in 1995 when they brought in the Dean Malenkos and the Eddie Guerreros, and then in '96 in came the luchadors like Rey Mysterio and all that kind of stuff, and they were doing things that you had never seen anybody do before. And that was around the time that I thought maybe I might have a shot at this. It wasn't because in WWE at the time, everybody, even Shawn, he's over 6 feet tall, but in WCW, Rey Mysterio coming in at 5'3", 145 pounds when he first started in WCW, that gave a guy like me the line of thinking, man, there's no reason I can't try this.
But were you feeling, hey, you've got a longer road to go because you weren't necessarily 6 foot 230?
Well, I knew that all along, but I also, in a strange turn of, it's only a strange turn of events that has led me to WWE, because I honestly thought when I started wrestling that my career would be spent doing Mexico and Japan. And I really looked forward to that because I loved all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I thought for sure that my career would be, because I'm not somebody who has ever wanted to be famous. I just loved wrestling. And I loved the idea of going to Japan, being able to wrestle there, and coming back to the United States and being anonymous, and just being a normal
I always
human being.
figured guys that got in the business to be famous kind of got in for the wrong reasons. You got to get in because you love the business. I see when I watch you work, I see some heavy influence by Japan-style wrestling, but I also see a European flavor, and I think that must have come from when you met William Regal and started working out with him. I mean, the guy's one of my favorite workers of all time. I know you guys are very close, and he speaks very highly of you as well. What did you pick up from William Regal?
Well, it's crazy. So when I met William Regal, I was actually under developmental. I got signed to a developmental contract when I was 18, and then got fired a year and a half later when they bought WCW. But in that time, I was lucky enough to meet William Regal, and he's awesome in the sense that he will help anybody that he sees that truly wants to learn. And so there is like a lost art form of British wrestling that only a few people can carry on, and he's one of them. And I was literally just fortunate enough to meet him at a time in my career when I saw it and was like, oh my gosh, and he opened my eyes to an entirely new world. Because like I said, I watched Japanese wrestling and lucha when I was in high school and stuff like that. But when I had never seen British wrestling, old British wrestling, because by then it was off television in England, the old style of British wrestling. So he would teach me, and me and Brian Kendrick, we were just fascinated by all of it. Like, what? We've never seen any of this stuff. And then he would like tell us, okay, and then he would get tapes and show us little things of like, of Johnny Saint and all these different legendary British wrestlers, and even like the stuff Finlay was doing in Europe at the time was just, it's just completely different than anything.
So you're watching a bunch of old World of Sports stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I ended up watching a lot of World of Sports stuff, and now it's great. The kids today, who if they're interested in wrestling, are so spoiled, and I assume that's everything throughout culture, not just wrestling, in any sort of avenue. But like, you had to really pursue these tapes, like, and try to find somebody who could get you some or something like that. Now, literally, you can just go on YouTube, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of awesome old World of Sport matches or Japan matches or anything like that. Like, it's all just right there on the internet. So
break down your understanding of the Lucha Libre style wrestling to me, because it is stuff that I really enjoy watching. And I, of course, when I go down to Mexico to film a reality show every few months, I get a chance to watch a lot of it. That being said, I appreciate the work that they're doing in the ring. I don't have a total grasp on the psychology of the situation. Can you break that down for me?
Absolutely not. I have no concept of it.
Well, how did you go do it?
Well, okay, so when I went to go do it, you essentially just kind of, you follow the leader as far as like, and I've always kind of taken this approach throughout my career when I've gone to different places, is that the people who are over there know the style there and know how to get over there. So if you listen to their directions and then kind of take your own interpretation from that. For them, I'm sure that they have some sort of psychology, but they were never able to explain it to me because I don't speak Spanish. But like when I went there, and my interest in Lucha Libre was purely from a small guy standpoint. As far as I'm like you, I've never been able to get into the psychology of what they're doing. I don't understand it. But what I really wanted to learn was how to do the style, because I saw how successful people like Eddie Guerrero were and Rey Mysterio and that sort of thing, and I thought that's a tool I need in my toolkit if I want to be successful.
I sent a text message to Shawn Michaels last night. Me and Shawn keep in touch more via text. He's a big hunter as well as I am, and I said, I'm interviewing Daniel Bryan, and you and I have met a few times. We've never really got a chance just to sit down and shoot the breeze or whatever. And I asked him what kind of student you were, and if you were a good kid as related to my age versus your age. You know what I'm saying? Shawn texted back verbatim. He said, fantastic. Hard worker, always there with extra effort, constant hustle, and extraordinary character. Honestly, everything you could ask for. Zero downside ever. And that's a direct quote from Shawn Michaels. And I know William Regal, Lord Steven Regal as I know him, thinks this is a rib. He came over to my house in Los Angeles about a month or two ago, and we did a podcast there in my house. And half the time, he was talking about you. And I ended up losing the memory card. So then it's a lost interview that I have to redo with him. He still thinks I'm pulling a rib on him, that the interview was bad. So I've got to redo my interview with Lord Steven Regal. But he, speaks very highly of you. And I want to segue here to the WWE 2K14 video game. When that thing launched back in Los Angeles a couple of months ago, and I got a chance to see you, but we didn't get a chance to, just sit around and shoot the breeze. But my point is, and I bring this up because you were maybe looking at yourself as kind of just being a wrestler who was going to be maybe not famous, but on the 2K14 game, The Rock, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, was on the cover of the game. But you were featured on the fan-created cover of the game. So the cover was created by a fan submission. That says to me that the WWE Universe sees many of the same things Shawn Michaels, Steve Regal sees in you. So you had to be very proud, very humbled to be featured on the fan-submitted cover. What were your thoughts when you heard this?
I was actually kind of blown away because I was on the fan-submitted cover for both the domestic and the overseas video game as well. And it's just, I don't know, it's like you said, it's very, very humbling because I don't see myself as like a star. And it's just very, very strange to me that, like, wow, people like took the time and effort to do that, and the covers that the people made were awesome. Like, I was like, wow, we have a very talented fan base as far as there's a lot of people who can do amazing things, and I get like little artwork stuff sent to me on Twitter and all that kind of stuff all the time that I'm just blown away by. But the fact that somebody would, okay, so I'm going to enter this thing, and I would think if I have the best chance I have to win this, to get into this contest, would be to do somebody like John Cena. You know what I mean? Do somebody like John Cena or CM Punk or somebody like that. That's my best opportunity. But they chose to do Daniel Bryan, and I think that's really, really cool. So it's just cool and humbling and just, I don't know, borderline frightening.
Well, from me to you, and I appreciate your humble attitude and the grace with which you have accepted this honor. But you are a star, and you have to realize that and never get a big head. And of course, I know you never will. But you are a star. You do have those top guy responsibilities, and you do carry weight wherever you go. So I know you don't want to say that, so I'm saying that to you. And let's talk a little bit about your look. You've changed it from when you started to now. I was watching back some old stuff from Ring of Honor. You had a great run through there, many tremendous matches, but, a bald head, no facial hair. And finally, here in the WWE, with the long bushy beard, the mop of hair, how long did it take you to say, hey, this is what I want to look like, or why I'm doing this? How did the beard, because I think it's a great marketing tool for you. It's a great look. And obviously, it's on T-shirts. It sells gimmicks, and it's marketable. So, was this a brainchild of an idea? Was this E=MC² moment, or hey, I'm gonna let my beard grow?
Well, it was. Hey, I'm gonna let my beard grow. But then, so I got this idea that I needed to change. Like, you constantly need to evolve, and especially with WWE, and especially with how much programming that WWE puts out all the time. I feel like there needs to be a constant evolvement of your character, and especially kind of to get to the next level, that sort of thing. So I started growing out my beard just to look a little bit meaner. But then I thought, you know what? I don't want to, I want to start growing out my hair. But the hair part of it, takes time, and your hair goes through awkward stages. And so I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep growing out my beard to distract people from the fact that I'm growing out my hair. And it wasn't until months after I had started growing out my hair that Triple H came up to me and said, "Are you growing out your hair?" And my hair was already long enough that it was no longer in that awkward stage because the beard is so distracting that it's like, oh, you don't even worry about what's going on up top. You just like see this mess of a beard. And so now it's more kind of what I had envisioned of like a wilder kind of appearance that would appeal more to because part of the problem for me is that WWE is marketed a lot towards the casual fan and a lot of children and that sort of thing. And look, as much as I have disregarded it throughout my career, like I was always like functional training. I wasn't into bodybuilding. I wasn't into anything like that. As much as I've disregarded looks throughout most of my career, it's very important here in WWE. And I'm not saying that you have to look like a bodybuilder, but you have to give them, it has to be a unique presentation. To me, a great example is Kofi Kingston, is somebody who goes out there and the kids always love him because when he comes out, he's colorful, he's got the dreadlocks, he's jumping up high in the air. And so I've always felt that my wrestling is enough to get me over with the adults, but the kids, it's different. You know, you have to be able to appeal to them now as well.
It's like a pie. It's like a pie, and you want to have as many slices of that pie as you can, not just a couple, and that represents your demographic. So that only makes sense. So let's talk about the venerable beard. I was in the middle. I'll drop a story on you. I was in the middle of growing my beard out for deer season down here. I had about a month worth of growth on my face, and that's a lot for me. You know, the whole beard, nothing on my head. We know what's going on there. So anyway, my wife gave me a hard time about it last night, and so I knocked it down. Now I have a goatee that's out of control, and she's able to live with that. So care of the beard, is it shampooed and conditioned on a daily basis? What's the care process? Are you brushing this thing out? Because as short as my hair was, I had about an inch worth of fuzz, and I would get my wife's hairbrush, and I would brush my beard. Is that acceptable? Okay, yes, it is acceptable, although it's interesting because I care so little for my appearance. Like, most of the time I'm not interested in that sort of thing. But what I do... But you have a fiancé who is. Right, yeah. And actually, so she makes sure, she loves the beard. Yeah. The most important thing to her is that the mustache is trimmed properly so that she can adequately kiss me and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, the beard gets shampooed and conditioned, every day nearly, So the shampoo and conditioning actually takes me a lot of time in the shower. I'm sure, as you know, as somebody who has most of my life had a shaved head and no facial hair, showering used to be a very short process, and now with all of this and the shampooing and the conditioning and all that kind of stuff, it takes like 10 or 11 minutes, which is 2 to 3 times as long as it used to take me before. But yeah, I still very rarely comb it, although I should. I feel like some of the hairs up front are starting to be dead and falling out, so I should probably take a little better care of it. Please tell me you're not the guy on a European tour when you've got 2 tour buses waiting, a bus full of bad guys and a bus full of good guys, and you're the one guy in the shower that everybody's waiting on because you're going through your beard process. Tell me you're not that guy. You know what? Honestly, I am not that guy, and I don't think I've ever been the last guy on the bus, even when I was in main events and stuff like that for the European tour. So yeah. So no, I'd like to think I'm not that guy, but it is possible that someday I will be that guy. Like, you know what? Screw all these other guys. I'm gonna make sure my beard is taken care of. Hey, let's shift gears and go back a little bit to the work. You're very accomplished mechanically in the ring. Was that the stuff, the work in the ring, just from a mechanical standpoint, something that was really natural and easy for you to pick up? Yeah, the wrestling part always came very naturally to me. It was the character stuff that was very difficult for me. Even just the hardest stuff for me was even just walking to the ring. Like that spotlight on you before you start wrestling, to me, is much harder than anything that I do in the ring.
I just naturally gravitated towards the technical wrestling aspect and the stuff that you do in the ring. But I'm naturally a shy person and not very outgoing, so like all the character stuff was much more difficult.
And you really mentioned something that a lot of people wouldn't even know existed. The walk to the ring. As soon as your music hits from when the crowd first sees you, that walk down the ramp, man, that can mean everything. Now, certainly, people aren't going to buy tickets to see you walk down a ramp. You've got to get into the ring and go through the paces and entertain them, highs, lows, and take them through a great match. But there is something to that, and it goes to, to me, it was the BMF walk, so there's something that goes with that. So if anybody that's listening to me talk with Bryan, check into that and then think about that. Now, psychology-wise, Bryan, you're working with some great people. Shawn Michaels, one of the great psychology guys of all time. Certainly, William Regal is too. How did the psychology develop for you? And I also, reading it, Masato Tanaka was a big influence for you. But how did you put the pieces together from the standpoint of the work in the ring, the timing, how and when to do what?
So it's interesting because when you first start wrestling, you just have to learn the basics. And Shawn told us basic psychology, but it's like it's fascinating when I think about it now. It's like your first, it would be like your first math class, and you have this professor who can do all these different kinds of amazing physics and calculus and all that kind of stuff, but he has to teach you addition. And if he talks on a much grander scale, you're not going to understand it because you're still trying to grasp addition. And so Shawn was just teaching us the basic psychology, and it's fascinating because it would almost be cool if they had like a finishing school for wrestlers where it was like, hey, you can go to, if you've been wrestling for 5 years or whatever, and you could go to the Shawn Michaels school, and he's not going to teach you any moves. He's just going to talk to you about match psychology and that sort of thing. That would be invaluable to people, right? Like to people who have already started their careers or who are independent wrestlers and WWE superstars now. Like, can you imagine like some of the, like having that and this having like a master class as far as like different ideas as far as psychology and all that kind of stuff goes. But unfortunately with Shawn, I wasn't able to do that kind of stuff. With William Regal, it's been nice because he's really been a mentor to me for my entire career as far as like even when I got fired from developmental back in 2001, he would still ask me to send him tapes and we'd talk about things and he would give me ideas and that sort of thing. Well, maybe you could try this or maybe you could try that. And then a lot of it too is just having wrestled all around the world and different styles of psychology. Like the Japanese style of psychology is very, very different from the American style of psychology, but there are parts of it that you can transfer over and make work really well if you understand both. And and that's like we said, neither of us understand lucha psychology, so it's like so that was just kind of moves and stuff. But yeah, and then like it's actually interesting because there's a point when you think the moves and stuff are very, very important, and then there came to a point where I realized that they weren't, and that the most over guys, and this was more so when I was in Japan, because you think of Japan, like what I thought of Japan is like, oh, these matches are great because they're doing all these great moves and the big false finishes and all that kind of stuff. But that's not why they were great, and it was more the fire. The fire in Japan is so important, just like a comeback, in the United States. But the fire and the intensity and all that kind of stuff, and that's when I really started changing my perception of what I was, as far as even when Ring of Honor started, I had some fire, but there was something clearly missing, and I would see it in a guy like Yuji Nagata or like the top guys in Japan, and how they would just show this fire, and when they showed the fire, people were ready to come unglued. Yeah, and then you start realizing like, whoa, these guys, although technically I might be on their level, I'm not there as far as connecting with the people, and that's where I had to change my thought process towards the entire thing. And that I feel like a lot of that has been part of my success, is my ability to realize that, wait a second, I'm going down the wrong path here. Like, I need to focus on this, because I've always gravitated towards the technical wrestling. Like, if you left me up to my own desires, I'd go out there and do hammerlock switches for 20 minutes. But I'd be like, I'd wrestle like Dory Funk. You know what I mean? Like, and Dory, that was great in that era, but wrestling's changed, and so yeah, like the ability to kind of switch your mindset and realize, like, wait a second, I'm not as good as some people like to say that I am. You know what I mean? Like, people will, and it's weird. This is a weird business, and you know this. Like, once you get to a certain point, people stop criticizing you. Right? Like, you become like, oh, well, or if something goes wrong, it's the other person's fault. And the other person that you're in the ring with, and people will say, oh, well, yeah, no, the match wasn't that good, but, you were in the ring with so-and-so. And to me, that's never an excuse. I'm sure you did too. You watch Ric Flair wrestle guys who had no business having great matches, and they had great matches, and then even watching you as you were doing your championship runs and all that kind of stuff, you had great matches with people that you probably shouldn't have had great matches with. John Cena had a great match with Khali I don't remember what year it was. It was one of the Royal Rumbles, but he had this really great match, and so that's part of being that guy, is that you can't blame anybody else but yourself. You have to go out there and take responsibility for whatever happens in the ring, and so and that's just looking at every aspect of your game. If this didn't work, how could I have made this work, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I kind of got my psychology from. It's just a hodgepodge of different people, and then William Regal being almost like my mentor, that guiding light. So,
have you relocated to Vegas?
Well, I did. I was living in Vegas. I lived in Vegas for from 2009 until last year when Bree and I moved in together. So I was living there for 3 or 4 years.
So now you're back where?
Now I'm in Phoenix.
Okay, how are you liking Phoenix?
It is hot, but Vegas was also hot.
It's hot.
Yeah, and but it's not, because really we're home so infrequently. What's most important to me is that I have stuff around me that I like, and that I have a decent airport. And the Phoenix airport is great. You get a lot of direct flights. So that's great.
So how are you? I read that you incorporate a lot of jiu-jitsu training into your off season. So I figured, well, you being in Vegas, that was a natural hookup there with a lot of the MMA fighters based out of there. Are you doing jiu-jitsu training in Phoenix now?
You know what? I've gone a couple times. So in Vegas, it was great because I would train at Randy Couture's gym, and my grappling coach is a guy named Neil Melanson, who was Randy Couture's head grappling coach for his last several fights, and just an awesome grappling coach. He trained under Gene LaBelle, and just really good. Like probably one of the best grappling coaches in the country. And then when I moved to Phoenix, a couple times I've gone to MMA Lab, which is where Benson Henderson trains.
Yep.
But our schedule is such now, with like getting that day and a half off every week, your body just needs to recover. And sometimes I went in for 2 days straight, and then I came back and then went right onto the road, and I was like, that was a horrible idea. Like, that was a really stupid idea. So.
But a lot of those guys, a lot of the MMA guys are fans of pro wrestling, so you've certainly had to cross paths with a lot of these guys who respect the knowledge that you have inside the squared circle of sports entertainment. Yeah, and it's just fascinating when you meet some of them who are wrestling fans, and then and then they're like, oh, so when I went to the MMA Lab, I actually met Benson Henderson on one of the days. He was there training, and I don't think he's a wrestling fan, but a couple of the guys that were there were, and so it was just kind of neat for them to be like, whoa, Daniel Bryan, that's so cool. And then I was sitting there without saying anything. I was like, whoa,
Benson Henderson, that's so cool. Like, but yeah, it's interesting because my grappling coach Neil Melanson, he used to love pro wrestling, and now that he's kind of taken a step back from it as far as he doesn't watch it as much as he used to because he's so busy training guys and that sort of thing. But like a lot of those guys really respect wrestling and have, and some of them, guys like Frank Trigg and Josh Barnett and stuff like that have actually had experience doing like Japanese pro wrestling over there, and so it's interesting just the style mesh and the respect that those guys have for pro wrestling.
Before our 60 minutes comes to a close here, Brian, I've got to ask you, you're what? You're 32, 33 right now?
32.
You're 32 years old. You've got, 13, 14 years in the business already?
14 years.
14 years, as I used to kid my buddy Brian Knobs, the young old guy. A guy with a lot of experience in a young body. You've had some injuries. I read you tore some ligaments in your shoulder in Ring of Honor, also some chest injuries. You had any major injuries? Was the detached retina a shoot or work?
Yeah, the detached retina was legit, and that was probably and I consider myself very fortunate because the shoulder stuff never required surgery. The only time I've ever had to take off from wrestling was 3 months in I had torn my shoulder and then but I was the Ring of Honor champion at the time, so it kept wrestling on it until December of that year. Took 3 months off and then was and doing physical therapy stuff, and then the detached retina, I should have taken more time off. My vision is still not good in my left eye, but I came back 3 weeks later because realistically, if you don't work, you don't get paid. Like any other job, if you don't work, you don't get paid. So,
hey man, it's nice to hear somebody say that because a lot of people don't realize that, and sometimes you have a tendency to come back from an injury too soon, and maybe as you did with the retina. But I mean, that's the mentality that I always like to hear. Too many people, want to back up to that paycheck, but it's all about going out there and earning what you get. With your busy schedule, with your fiance, your travels around the world, your training, do you have any hobbies? What do you do to relax and kick back?
Well, I'm an avid reader. I've started to learn so I like to work with my hands, and I like gardening, and I like all that kind of stuff. I've started to get really into cob building, which is building with the earth, like building like sustainable natural building and ecological farming and all that kind of stuff. So so it's some weird stuff, and you kind of have to
not
do that
weird.
a little bit.
You see someone who's in tune with, looking at some stuff into the future of our world. So I think that's very interesting. What kind of stuff do you like to read?
So I just finished reading a book called Here on Earth by Tim Flannery, which is he's a biologist who's talking about the upcoming problems that we face as a planet and as a population, and just talking about it's talking a little bit about overpopulation. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and that's not sustainable, especially given the way we currently live and how and all that kind of stuff. But then talking about solutions as far as what people can do. And change. And one of the big things that we have to do is change people's idea of what is a good life. Like the idea of the big houses and the big cars and all that kind of stuff is simply not sustainable. And just talking about a lot of that kind of stuff, and then the history of like, weird, not weird stuff, but like talking about the history of the theory of evolution and how like Charles Darwin came up, and people have coined the phrase survival of the fittest, and that phrase itself has led to so many atrocities by people who think that like, okay, because I'm wealthier or because I'm this or because I'm that, I'm better than the other people, and that's evolution because it's survival of the fittest. That's what it is. But that's not actually, he didn't use that phrase until after Origin of Species was published, and there was actually on the same day, it was co-published with another theory of evolution by a guy named Alfred Russel Wallace, whose idea was they were very similar, but he took a different take on it, and it's not survival of the fittest, but it's survival of the things that best fit in with the habitat around them, and which to me is much more accurate. And we as humans have to look at that as like, we have taken this world as this is completely ours. We can destroy as much as we want of it because this is made for us and that sort of thing. But that's not how. This is our habitat. If you look at us as a species, this is our habitat, and we need to. If you lose your habitat, you inevitably have consequences, and we're in the process of losing some very important things that and people. The food chain is fascinating. You don't know what you need to survive, right? So like hundreds of species are going extinct all the time, and we don't know which of those species, because of what we're doing as humans, because of all the things, all the forests we're cutting down, because of all the pollution we're putting into the air and into the water and all that kind of stuff, we don't know which line of the food chain is absolutely necessary for our survival. And I'm not somebody who's into some sort of post-apocalyptic world, but I do believe that there is some sort of reckoning that's going to be coming, and especially like with the temperature changes and the more storms, and it's already proven. I mean, like there was a lot of stuff about people doubting climate change or whether it was human-made and all that kind of stuff. But
I don't doubt climate change. I think it's getting hotter than hell. Are you down with that?
Yeah. I sure am. And the temperatures of the oceans are warming, and that also means that the sea levels are rising, which has a lot of catastrophic information.
Stuff like that bothers.
Yeah. And so but what that means, and we all have to take individual responsibility for this, is we all have to take responsibility for the way that we live, because unfortunately we've reached a point of absolute corruption, which is we can't rely on the government to solve these problems for us. There's too many vested interests. There's too many as much as President Obama may want to tackle climate change, he also is funded by the coal companies. So
well, let's go. We gotta shift gears on the Obama thing, because that's we won't turn this into a political discussion. Next time I have you back on the show, we can do that, but let's don't do that now, because I would require a whole nother 2 hours of your time, and I know you got to go. Last thing I was going to ask you, okay, 32 years old, 14 years in the business. The way I was thinking about your future, for me, I was thinking, wow, the way this guy works, you've got 10 years left in you if you wanted them. How far down the road do you look?
I tend not to look too far down the road. I try to take everything day by day, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. As you know, something could happen today in the ring.
Oh, yeah.
That could change my life forever, and so I try to just enjoy the moments and try not to think about too much long term and that sort of thing, other than just like saving and making sure that I take care of my family and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like if I could, because I love wrestling, so if I could, I'd wrestle until there's got to be a time when your body tells you that you have to stop. But right now, my body.
You won't know that until you get done, though, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Hey, last question. I was watching some of your highlights. The missile drop kick. That has to hurt the giver more than it does the taker. Am I right or wrong?
You absolutely are. And I've had one stinger. I've had one stinger in my entire career, and it was live on Raw, and it was giving Randy Orton a missile dropkick. And I did the dropkick, landed on my back, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't move.
God.
And so it's not, at least yours was cool. Like yours, Owen gave you that pile driver, and it looked brutal. It was like, oh man, this guy dropped me right on my head. But mine was just like, nope, I just did this move that I do all the time, that I land flat on my back, and
okay,
down I go.
Words from a grizzled veteran to a wily veteran, young in age as yourself. Pick your spots on the missile drop kick. That's not a gimmick. Hey, I'm going to let you go, Brian. I appreciate you coming on the show. I know you got a lot of things to do. It was an absolute blast getting a chance to spend some time talking to you. Obviously, people are going to listen to this conversation, and they're going to dig it. But there's so many other things we can talk about, and we will do that next time you come on the show.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you for joining us for another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. For more Steve Austin Show, go to PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
This Is Monsters is a true crime podcast and YouTube channel where I tell the stories of the worst people on the planet. Though the stories of the victims are told, we focus on the monster who carried out the evil act. The show is split into seasons, and each season has a theme. In Season 1, we covered cases of filicide, which is the act of a parent killing their own child. In Season 2, we covered cases of people killing for love. We recently finished up Season 3, where we covered cases of parricide, which is the act of someone killing their parents. Tune in now as we start Season 4, where we dive into the minds of family annihilators, sick individuals who decided to destroy their entire families. Check us out anywhere that you listen to podcasts or on YouTube by searching This Is Monsters.